Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are going to talk today about the analytical essay. So you will find this in module number 6, and it is our big essay for the semester. It is worth 20 points on your final grade, and it has a few processes that we're familiar with, and then it has a couple of new things that we'll learn just in this unit about writing essays. So to get started, first of all, let's talk about exactly what the analytical essay is. Keep in mind, this is over our Write for a Cause project. And so the analytical essay will comprise 20% of the overall score in the class, right? This essay is meant to inform, but the final exam essay is meant to persuade, but it'll have the same structure as the analytical. So as I'm talking about the analytical essay, I want you to also keep in mind this is the same information that you'll need for the argument essay. It's just that your purpose for writing will be different, okay? The analytical, again, is to inform using facts and source-based information. It's in an objective tone, whereas the argument essay is meant to persuade, okay? And you'll still be using facts and you'll still be using source-based information. It's just that you will have a subjective tone. You will use everything you can to try to get me to agree with you and want to also support your cause, right? Couple of things about this essay. This essay has a word count. It's 750 to 1,500 words, and it will include quite a few things. It will include a thesis statement, which you can actually pull directly from the research proposal assignment, right? So with the research proposal assignment, part of the deal was for you to write a hypothesis right down here, where you answer your research question. Do you guys remember this part?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so a quick way to get to your thesis statement is just to literally take the sentence that you have here and then plop it into the analytical essay and maybe reword it a bit and narrow it down a bit so that you can have a nice, strong thesis statement that you know you can prove with the research that you have. Another way to arrive at this same idea is to maybe just take one of the topic sentences that you use in the research proposal essay, because that topic sentence is only going to cover a certain amount of information from your research, and it's going to do the narrowing for you. So that's another way that you can approach it. Maybe consider taking one of the topic sentences that you have from the research proposal assignment. And again, if you have your mics on, please remember to mute them until you're ready to ask a question. Just double check for me really quickly to see that you have your mics muted so that there's no feedback while I'm going through this, over the top interesting information. Okay. Are there any questions on ways to arrive at your thesis statement using information or content that you've already created before? No? Okay, we're moving on. All right, so a couple of guidelines for this essay is that you want to use MLA format, and we learned that in module number 5 when we were doing the short answer responses, and you had to give the parenthetical citation. So you're going to carry over that skill into this essay where you will use parenthetical citations in order to cite sources that you are directly quoting. All right. You will also use MLA structure when you're creating your works cited page. All right. And so we'll look at a sample of that in our next video as we think about the conclusion and works cited and all that information. Another thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to bring over all of the information that you learned about writing introduction paragraphs. So you'll want to still think about introductory statements, bridges, and thesis statements. You will also want to make sure that you're thinking about reflect and project in the conclusion paragraph. But one of the major things that's going to be a learning point for us for this essay is going to be the body paragraph. And that is where we have topic sentences, which we're familiar with. We have directly quoted evidence, which we're familiar with. And then we have warrants or explanations where that evidence has to support the claim. We're familiar with that. One of the things that we're going to learn that's new is going to be something called significance. And the significant sentence connects back into the thesis. And so we'll look at that here in just a couple of minutes. Are there any questions over anything that I've covered so far just on the introduction page?
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. So we've already looked at our assignment for last week, and that was to look at spoils of war. We had a discussion question for that. And then we have now moved into the wonderful point of writing the essay. Here's our Zoom information for today's meeting, and voila, here we are. All right, so our Write for a Cause analytical essay, again, is 20% of our grade. It's 750 to 1,500 words. As a rule, class, you want to make sure that your essays are not on the lower end of this scale. As a rule, you always want to start looking at where's the midpoint. So what would be the midpoint between 750 and 1,500 words? Anyone have an answer for that?
Somewhere around like 1,011.
Yeah, somewhere around 1,100 words, 1,000 words, 1,200 words. Usually when a professor gives you a range like this, if you do 750 words, it better be the best 750 words you've ever written in your life with no errors. Everything's well developed to the best of your ability and everything's perfect. That's what happens when you write 750 words. If you write 1,500 words, it just means that you had a lot that you wanted to say and you needed more space to say it. Really, the sweet spot is going to be somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200 words. Okay, so that's kind of where you want to aim your essay. All right, and Daniel, I think you asked me a little bit earlier about how many paragraphs it should be. It should be whatever fits within this range, right?
Okay.
And you may find that you have 4 body paragraphs as opposed to 3 or maybe 5. But you definitely want to have 3 because it's a standard essay, and standard essays generally have at least 3 pillars of strength, which means 3 body paragraphs.
Okay.
Are there any questions about the word count and how to interpret the word count?
Can we go above 1,500 or does it have to be in that 1,500?
If you go above 1,500, you know, I'm not going to say off with your head, that's horrible. Of course, I'm going to want to read more of what you have to say. But the 1,500 is really where you want to cut off if you can. I mean, you still have an entirely new essay to write with the argument essay. And so some of the points that maybe you want to bring up in your analytical essay, you could use as ammunition in your argument essay to convince me to be on your side.
Okay.
All right, that's a great question. All right, are there any questions at all?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so this is essentially your syllabus connection. And the syllabus connection just makes sure that you know exactly what the syllabus says you're required to do and what the assignment is asking you to do. So you'll find that there are many parallels in most of what I just said with your essay. A couple of things you want to remember: if I ask for a resubmit, you're going to have 24 hours to get that in. Another thing you're going to want to remember is what someone asked a little bit earlier about the sources, and I think that was you, Daniel. And with the sources, you can only use sources that have been vetted and that have been approved by me. And so your preliminary bibliography, annotated bibliography sources are a great place to go. The other thing that you want to keep in mind for this essay that's going to be different than the research proposal essay is that you are going to have parenthetical citations. One of the things that I saw was missing from some of the short answer assignments that I have been wonderfully poring over the last few days is parenthetical citations. Parenthetical citations essentially qualify the information that you've quoted. It tells the reader where to go to read this information or to find this information. So for this paper, parenthetical citations are very important. And you want to make sure that you're using the MLA version. I got an email and the student was like, I'm not really sure what MLA means. MLA stands for Modern Language Association. It is what English professors and English folks use in order to cite things, all right? So for your English audience, because since you're in English class, you're gonna want to make sure that you're giving a MLA citation, right? So for instance, you want to give the author's last name. In this case, it's Bush, page 239. Or if the quote that you're giving spans over 2 or 3 pages, then you're going to give again the author's last name, and then you'll give the range of pages. Okay. If for some reason you have a source and there are no published page numbers, and this is going to apply to maybe 1% of you, then you would give the person's last name, and then you would just give the page number that the printed copy offers, right? So if it was 3 pages that was a part of the PDF, then you would entitle it page 1 or page 1 through 2. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So we talked about how to arrive at your thesis statement. You want to make sure that you're narrowing your thesis statement to include your topic, and then you want to make sure that you're adding a controlling idea to it. To do that, you can take your Write for a Cause topic, and you can just simply narrow it down to just the part that you want to focus on for this paper. Keep in mind, you are not attempting to convince me for the analytical paper. You're just trying to give me information about that very narrowed part of your Write for a Cause topic, okay? So you want to make sure that you've narrowed it to something that your research can actually support, okay? So going through this narrowing process is a good idea.
So it's like more like a research proposal, but more in depth.
Well, it's more like the process that you used in your research proposal to arrive at your topic sentence. Remember that for that process, you had to look at the articles that you had, and you had to try to figure out, how do these articles work together? How do they come together, and what can I say as a topic sentence in order to make them all fit under this same section, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same process again. It's just that you have to remember that with this thesis statement, you're going to need to expand it through at least 3 topic sentences. In other words, you're going to have to cut it 3 different ways or more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Class, is this resonating with anybody? Are you guys following me? You can write this in the chat, or you could say it audibly. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, thank you guys. I see it in the chat. Okay, so the process that I just talked about is offered to you here. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I showed you how to do it in terms of going back to get your hypothesis. And then here are a couple of tips for narrowing it. Again, consider one of your topic sentences. Why? Because you've already organized the information. And you can go directly from that idea and know that you have ammunition from your source material in order to back you up. And then you can narrow it. And once you do that, then you can copy and paste your thesis statement onto a Google Doc or maybe onto a Word doc so you can capture it. And then you'll know that you're going to build everything from there. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is how you create it, and this is how you capture it. Let's move on. Okay, so there are methods for revising vague thesis statements. And so one of the ways you can do that is by replacing vague words. Like for instance, look at this sample. A vague thesis statement is, my senior prom was really bad. A revised thesis statement would be, my senior prom was disappointing, because that explains what bad actually is. And then it gets even better because now I know why. It's disappointing because my date was arrested for drinking and driving. Do we see the difference between a vague thesis statement and a descriptive thesis statement?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Anyone have any questions about that? Okay, The next method is to create natural divisions in your thesis statement, right? So your vague thesis statement may start as the movie The Color Purple was realistic. Okay, that's cool in and of itself, but look at how much more interesting this thesis statement is. The movie The Color Purple was realistic because of the scenery, the music, and the acting. Okay, so with this, now you have 3 areas that I can expect to read in your paper. Okay, and this is just called natural divisions. Okay, so this kind of takes the place of maybe if you learned in high school that you should write your 3 topic sentences or your 4 topic sentences in the introduction, right? That's the way most of us were taught. Well, now that, at the college level, we're taking that away from you. We're saying, no, 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 give us a bridge. You now can still get that same feel by writing it writing it in your thesis statement by just offering natural divisions. Does that make sense, everybody? Thank you, chat. Okay, so if you want a tip on how to do this and maybe see a teaching demonstration on it, you can watch this video. It's a live class, and we go from creating a topic and then developing that topic into a strong thesis statement. One of the things that you want to do as you get ready to write your thesis statements is you want to avoid a heavy-handed thesis statement announcement. And you also want to avoid these in your topic sentences. You don't want to say things like this essay will discuss, or this essay will be about, or this paragraph is going to talk about. Instead, just write the information without telling me you're going to do it. It takes away from your paper, and it's just not a professional way to write. Now blogs, they write that way. Why? Because they want to create more of a personal feel, and they want you to know that, that you're taking a journey with them. So yeah, they may tell you that this is going to happen. However, as an academic, we don't usually do this. Instead, we just say the information and then we prove it, or we explain it. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, good. Thank you, chat. Okay, so here's what you can do. When you want to revise your thesis statement, make sure that you double check to see that it's narrowed. Make sure that you're using descriptive words if you need to. Consider using the natural order of things. And then once you have a strong thesis statement, you're ready to go. And now it's time to build an introduction around it. All right, so that's my whole spiel on thesis statements. Does anyone have any questions about thesis statements? Let me know in the chat if you found any of that information helpful. All right. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for saying yes, it was helpful. Okay, let's talk about the introduction paragraph. Okay, so for the introduction paragraph, you're going to have the same structure that you had in the previous essay in the research proposal. Okay, you're going to have an introductory statement, a bridge, and a thesis. Excuse me. So remember, for your standard K-12 introduction, you have an introductory statement, an attention grabber or a hook, a thesis statement, then you have those 3 topic sentences, and maybe a conclusion statement. I just mentioned that when I was talking about the natural division of things, or the natural division thesis statement. At the college level, again, we want you to have that introductory statement, the bridge, the thesis statement, and then an optional conclusion statement. All right, so we're going to work from this structure, and we're going to see what happens with our writing. Oh, and if you want to know more about introductions, I'm sorry, I did move pretty quickly through that. There's a whole teaching demonstration on introduction paragraphs, and it's right here. You can access it at any point. Now I'm moving. Okay, so there are 5 approaches that one can use to write introductions. I'm going to go through these briefly. We talked a little bit about introductions in the previous essay, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. I just want to kind of walk you around so that you can see what's in here and see maybe what you want to use. Here's just a little visual to show you what that introduction paragraph should look like. It starts with a hook, moves to a bridge, and then a thesis. The funnel approach, offers a general sentence first, and then it narrows down to your thesis statement. So that's beautiful and that's great. And I will get a lot of those, I'm sure. The thing is that it doesn't necessarily offer a great introductory statement to hook the reader in. It doesn't capture the reader's attention. So here's a pro tip to revise the introductory statement. Maybe include a shocking statistic to that first sentence to make that funnel pop and make the funnel work a little bit more effectively. Another way you can do that is to include historical or factual data. Again, it helps you to just create ethos or presence. So then your reader will trust you and follow you through all the way through to the end of the paragraph, because you hook them in early with information they want to hear about. All right. And then don't tell anybody, folks who are actually on this webinar today, there's a secret extra credit opportunity right here. Wink, wink, wink. So if you want to take advantage of this secret extra credit opportunity, please do. And you can send that in and you can get 1 point on your final grade. Somebody say yay in the chat room, please. All right, I see the woohoo.
Is there a time limit on the extra credit?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I like extra credit because extra credit is helpful. So I don't think there should be penalties placed on extra credit. The thing is that we have extra credit available with Writing Center tutors. The challenge with that is that once you are done writing everything, you don't need them. So it's better to get in with them as quickly as possible. Also, another challenge is that right now, all of our tutors are online. And so trying to get an appointment with one of them may be challenging the further you get in the semester. So trying to get in early, I think, will really, really benefit you in the long run.
Okay, because I've been trying to save some of the extra credit stuff for when there's a dry spell and like the busyness to get it all done.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure if I couldn't do something like that. Or...
Yeah, of course you can. I want to give you extra credit. So
y'all getting breaks?
Barely.
So yeah, well, I want to give you extra credit. So definitely get it in as soon as you can so that I can, calculate your points and add them in. Keep in mind, extra credit is something that I add in at the very end of the semester. You won't see it in your score. It's just that you can add it on to your final average. So if you see that your average is an 87, but you've done 5 extra credit assignments, you've gone to the Writing Center 5 times, then your grade would be a 93, and so you'd know that you would get the A in the course. All right?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so there's one idea for the introductory statement and maybe how to improve it. Also, the contrast approach. The contrast approach is cool. In other words, you kind of start opposite of where you want to go. It's a cool approach. With that, sometimes the contrast approach doesn't offer a good way to build a bridge. So you want to still, if you use the contrast approach, develop a bridge using pros and cons or agreements or disagreements just to make it strong. Because look at how small this paragraph is. It could be so much better if it had a stronger bridge. All right. The anecdote approach, we've talked about this, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because we spent so much time on it in the research proposal section. But with the anecdote approach, you want to make sure that you're telling an interesting story. You want to make sure it has mystery and it offers maybe a time frame or maybe a strong description of the characters. Some of us in our research proposal used dialogue, and it was really cool in order to open up that introduction paragraph. So this happens to be a really good anecdotal introductory statement because it does offer mystery, it offers a date, and it gives you a strong description of the characters. And plus, it's just a really scary story. And then the question approach. Again, we talked about the question approach in the research proposal essay. It's going to be that rhetorical question. Don't forget, you want to ask why or how with the rhetorical question. And you want to make sure that you're making your audience think about what it is that you're going to say, as opposed to be able to answer the question right away and lose interest right away. And then finally, the quote approach. The quote approach used to be my favorite introductory statement approach because I always like to hear wisdom or cool thoughts that great thinkers said at some point. And so the quote approach is still wonderful. You can use quotes from famous people like JFK, or you can use quotes from grandma because grandma has amazing wisdom. Just keep in mind that if you do use the quote approach, you want to make sure that you qualify who the speaker is and maybe in some way their significance as you start to kind of build down from their quote. All right, you can't just like plop the quote in there and then just keep it moving. It doesn't work that way, right? You want to put the quote up there and then kind of, contextualize the quote maybe, and then build into a bridge from there. Keep in mind, you want to, again, give the pros and cons. You want to offer a bridge, maybe using various points of view. In this particular instance, I give a couple of tips for the way that various point or those various points of view can be articulated. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it now because we have more information to cover, but if anyone has any questions about it, I'll address it now. Other than that, I'll leave the information alone and assume that you're able to look at it and kind of make decisions about it. Does anyone have any questions about the quote approach and maybe building a bridge with the pro tip that's offered here? Okay, thank you, chat. Okay, so so we've gone through the whole thing. This just ends with thesis statement. It kind of takes us back into what we've already talked about before. So if anyone wants to review this information in order to hear about thesis statements again, then by all means do. The main thing this is communicating is that the thesis statements are at the end of the paragraph and not at the beginning for each one of those paragraphs. Okay, so here's a sample introduction paragraph. And with this paragraph, it gives us a couple of things that we really like. First of all, it's color coded so we can kind of see the different movements. And then I've put a revision checklist here just to see if it makes sense. So if you look at the introduction paragraph, it says, after stimulating the largest single year increase in a 44-year history, e-cigarette use has trailblazed society's newest, I can't read my chats there. The chat's still there. I can't read this. Maybe that's good. Oh, I'm sorry. It has trailblazed society's newest epidemic despite the U.S. teen smoking rate plummeting to an all-time low of 4.6%. So notice that this student used a shocking statistic, which I liked. There's one thing, though, that I think would have made this introductory statement a little bit better. Can anyone tell me what they think it is?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I mean, I said this is a good introductory statement. I like it. There's one thing, though, that's missing that would make this seem so much more satisfying. And I asked if anyone has any idea of what that is. Where did this information come from? You trust it?
We don't know. Oh, he did add like.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. So even if he would have said the New York Times reported in 2003, something like that, then that helps me to understand where this quote comes from and if it is, something that I can believe. But is it a shocking statistic? Yes. So did the student, do what it was that I requested? Yes. Was it the best thing ever? Not really. It could have had that one little part in there to make it so much better. Are there any questions about that?
So do you want us to wait, give me a second.
Do I want you to do it?
Do you want us to when we're doing like a quote, whatever he's doing, do you want us to have that source where we found it from? If we're doing a shocking statistic?
Yeah, well, I mean, he gives us this statistic. I just don't know where it comes from. So even if he just puts in his introductory statement, the New York Times reported in 2003 that this is and the other, then it's fine. You don't necessarily need to put this as a part of your works cited page, right? It's,
Oh, okay.
you know, this is just a stronger way to introduce data whenever you're doing an introductory statement. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
It doesn't make or break the paper. It just makes you more believable.
Okay.
All right, so it's a shocking statistic, so check, it's good. Next, did the student offer a logical, well-developed bridge? Well, let's take a look. When the initial electronic version of e-cigarettes was conceptualized in 2003 by Ruin Technology, its emergence was marked as a healthy alternative to conventional cigarettes. Okay, we're bridging out of that introductory statement. Since then, the e-cigarette market has proliferated and is now evolved to be the most commonly used tobacco product. Nice. After only 9% of consumers are found to be utilizing e-cigarettes as a way to combat cigarette addiction, while in actuality, the largest consumer demographic is U.S. middle and high school students. What do we think about that sentence? Did it take us from one location to another?
Yes.
Yeah, how did it do it? What's our keyword there?
Give me 1 second.
And I'm looking at the chat, you guys are doing great. That's right, very good, Sabrina. It was however, right? So the word however tells us that we're looking now at another idea. So you kind of see the pros and cons building, and you see the various points of view there as well. Could the student have written this a little bit better? For sure. And I left it raw so that you could see what it looks like when it comes to my table. But I think that they did a very good job of at least bridging from one point of view to another. And notice again that they give us another statistic, right? So again, I can trust this statistic a little bit more because we mentioned Ruin Technology in 2003. However, I don't know where that particular 9% came from. And so again, just clarifying those types of details takes away all doubt in your audience's mind. All right. Is that helpful? Anyone? Okay, good. Let's take a look at the next sentence. With the consumers at hand being of such young ages, e-cigarettes are not serving as an aid to cope with former addiction, but are instead fostering addiction. Okay, now notice that he's setting us up to talk about young e-cig users, okay, because he mentions age in that sentence. And then we moved into the thesis. Adolescent e-cig, sorry, I have to move this chat screen. Adolescents e-cigarette use can be preventable if the regulation of manufacturers is enforced by restricting advertising, flavor reduction, age verification, and educating the public of potential health risk. Okay, so what are some of the key things that we learned about the thesis statement? What can we expect to see?
That he gave us like topics that he should talk about with the flavor reduction, the age verification.
Very good, very good. We see the natural order of things, right? So we see restricted advertising, flavor reduction, age verification, and educating the public of potential health risks. All right, so do we see how he used the natural separation and order of things in order to create that thesis statement? Okay, so this student got a good grade on this introduction statement. Again, it's not perfect. It has a couple of things that maybe could have been written a little bit differently, but overall, he checked all the boxes and did a good job with it.
The thesis statement doesn't seem that much like a question. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, for the thesis statement for this assignment, if you notice, there's no research question here. Instead, you just have the regular thesis statement that sets up the reader for what they're going to hear about, right?
Okay.
So that's one of the differences between the research proposal assignment and then also this assignment, okay?
Okay, thank you.
That's a great point of clarity there. Now, the paper, I'm sorry, the page that says creating essays and supporting statements, believe it or not, this page is going away, so I'm not going to spend any time on it because I have a new and improved version of that, and it is right here. Okay, So forget you saw that other one. Let's look at this one. Are there any additional questions about the thesis statement as we get ready to move into body paragraphs? Okay, all right, good. I hope it's all clear now. Okay, so let's talk about body paragraphs. So in this case, the body paragraph is going to be used to expand the thesis statement with topic sentences. It's going to allow the writer to explain topic sentences with logical support, and it's going to establish credibility with the audience through well-developed supporting information. All right. So it has three purposes. So to do this, it's going to use a deductive reasoning pattern. And that deductive reasoning pattern, don't forget, is going to start with your main idea first, and then it's going to give an example of it, and then it's going to explain it, okay? It's going to give the main point first, and then it's going to give an example of it, and then it's going to give an explanation. So it's going to answer three questions. What's your point? Can you give me an example? And how does your example establish your point? And if you can answer these three questions, then you've probably written a really good introduction paragraph. This is very similar to what we learned in the short answer response. Why? Because again, you were given a claim, you gave me an example of what you meant in your claim by giving me evidence, and then you gave me a warrant, which was an explanation. Do we see the connection between the short answer response we just did and then also the body paragraph that we're going to write? Wonderful, good. Okay, thank you, chat. All right, so let's take a look at the structure of this thing. All right, so we're going to start with a topic sentence. Notice that there's no introductory statement for the body paragraph. You just go directly into a sentence that logically supports the thesis statement and creates guidance for this body paragraph. The next thing we're going to find is that we're going to have evidence, and this evidence is going to offer support by giving facts, opinions, statistics, anecdotes, or testimonies or research that will be used to support your claim. One of the things you want to ask right here is, Ms. Cooper, do we need directly quoted evidence, or can our evidence be summarized? Is that not a great question? Okay, you want to offer directly quoted evidence because directly quoted evidence separates your voice from the source that you are offering to your audience. And what you want to do, you want to keep a division of your voice from the evidence's voice. And that keeps you out of hot water with plagiarism or patch plagiarism. I'm going to talk a little bit more about patch plagiarism in our next video when we think about how we're writing sources and what's good and what's bad. All right, but I want to just put that out there now so that you are thinking about what you need to do with the evidence that you offer. Does anyone have any questions about evidence before we move forward?
So what do you mean by testimonies? Because I don't understand what that means.
Testimonies are going to be what people have said about whatever it is that you're offering, right? So for instance, when we think about the power of education, which was, I think, Michelle Obama's speech, she gave a testimony of her story in terms of her North Star experience. She also gave testimony for Roger Sanchez and his North Star experience. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are considered testimonies.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you mean.
Okay, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to think about are explanations. These are going to work like warrants. I'm not going to go in a lot of detail about that because we spent a lot of detail on that, or a lot of time on that during a short answer response. And then we're going to talk about significance. And significance is what connects your paragraph, your body paragraph, back to the thesis statement. It's kind of a deliberative attempt to make that connection, all right? And then, of course, we have the conclusion statement, which closes out the paragraph, and it can transition the reader into the next body paragraph. All right. Let's take a look at the sample. And then that's going to be where we close out today. All right. All right. Does anyone have any questions before I go any deeper into the body paragraph? We're just about done for the day.
Is it okay if we copy at all from the research proposal that we had submitted?
That's a great question. You don't want to copy, if you will, from the research proposal. Instead, you may want to take the idea and you want to rephrase it or paraphrase
Okay.
it. The difference between the analytical essay and the research proposal, and it's intentional, is that with the research proposal, you were only supposed to summarize content, right? Whereas with the analytical essay, you can actually cite sources and you can use their exact words. So even though you're communicating the same ideas, you're using two different forms of evidence, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And the citation, that's basically the same as what we've been doing for the answer and response stuff, right? And how we're citing it?
Correct.
Okay.
You will be using the parenthetical citations in MLA format.
Okay.
And that's what you want to use all the way through.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Are there any other questions?
So why don't we have, like, for a research proposal, why don't we have a really good point to our thesis statement in our research proposal? Can we use that in our analytical?
Keep in mind that for your research proposal, the intent was for you just to show off your research. This paper is intended for you to inform me about a narrowed aspect of your topic. So there shouldn't be a lot of carryover, even though the ideas may be some of the same ideas. So say you take your topic sentence from your research proposal, your first one, and say you want to use that in order to explain what it is you want to talk about regarding that aspect of your topic. Obviously, the sources that you use to talk about that are going to be the same ones that are in that paragraph from your research proposal. Is everybody following me so far?
Kinda.
That's what I'm asking. So if you take the topic sentence from your research proposal, right? Say you want to borrow that and you want to use it as your thesis statement in order to write this next essay. Then you already know that the content that was used in the paragraph in the research proposal that was affiliated with that topic sentence will also give you information for what you will use in your analytical essay. Is everybody following me so far?
Yeah, I see it now.
Okay, good. All right, now, what you do with that information may change because now you have to come up with 3, 4, 5 topic sentences in order to address the information that you have in those articles.
Gotcha.
Okay, so as you break it down, you may find that a topic or something that you talked about in the research proposal was so big to where you can't really use that one idea in your analytical essay. Instead, you may just be able to use an aspect of that idea.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
So how many sources are we going to use? Because we used 5 last time. Are we going to use like some of the 5 or just 3, or how's it going to work?
You get to choose, actually. This paper does not give you as many guidelines as the first because this paper is kind of testing your ability to use what you've already learned, right? So you get to make a lot more decisions about what you use in this paper. And so you may decide you want to use 2 sources or 3 sources, or maybe even 7 sources. Maybe you want to pull in sources that you didn't use for your annotated and preliminary essay. Right? I'm sorry, your annotated and your preliminary bibliography. No, I can't talk. For your annotated bibliography and your research proposal, you may want to pull things that you use from your preliminary bibliography, but you just didn't write about in those other 2 assignments. Okay. Any other questions?
I know.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I want to just take you through the movements of this, but I'm going to actually save the whole process of going through this sample body paragraph for our next webinar because we're almost at our time. But I want to point out certain things that are happening on this page, and then we'll pick up here the next time and we'll move into other ideas. The first thing I want to point out is that I want you to notice that we pulled the thesis statement from the introduction paragraph, and it's right here in front of this body paragraph. That's intentional. And the reason is because in the sample body paragraph, I want to be able to say that I have a sentence that connects here and here. All right. So as you're thinking about the assignment that you're doing this evening, and as you're thinking about analyzing the three sample essays, you know, you may want to make sure that you're thinking about the thesis statement as you're measuring everything else against it. So if you notice, one thing that this thing has is a connection between the thesis, and then this is called the significance. Again, the significant sentence in a body paragraph is intended to connect it back to the thesis statement. And so that's why it's in red. All right, another thing you want to look at as you're thinking about the sample assignment that you have tonight, and also your own work, is you want to make sure that you have a clear topic sentence, okay? Notice that this topic sentence starts the paragraph, and notice that it's general enough to cover all of the information in this paragraph. Also note that there is zero statistics in here. Note that there is no source material in here because the topic sentence should not include evidence. Evidence goes in the evidence section, and the topic sentence has its own section, and they should not intertwine. Okay, so if even in your short answer assignment, you may have found that you may have lost points, for instance, on your claims or with your topic sentences because you included evidence in your topic sentence. These are two separate things, and you should keep them separate. Are there any questions about topic sentences and them not including evidence? Are there any questions?
Nope.
Okay. The next thing you want to note is that right after the topic sentence, this student offers evidence right away. Now, to be honest, this student probably could have written the same sentence without directly quoting this information. This would have been a great opportunity for him to contextualize with summary as opposed to writing evidence there. It's completely legitimate to do it, but it's a choice, but it wasn't necessary. But what we do like is that he introduces the information and we know where it comes from, and then we see the nice parenthetical citation at the end. Also note that right afterwards, the student offers an explanation for this quote, and it kind of sets us up to move into the next level of evidence. Notice that he talks about appealing child-friendly flavorings here, and then we see an example of those child-friendly ideas here with the fruit melody, mango, and cucumber, right? So with that, we're able to then get a sense of what he means. All right, so I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I just want to show you what the evidence and the explanation often looks like. And I want to give you some idea of how this paragraph is set up. So after we end our call today, you can take a look at the rest of the paragraph. It's color-coded. Your topic sentences are in blue, the evidence is in green, the explanations are in the pink-purple color, and then the significance is in red. And then I give explanations for what's happening at each phase of this sample. And hopefully this will help you feel more confident as you work on your discussion question for this evening. The next time we meet, we are going to go into all of the other things that we have to do for this paper. And it's mainly going to be to talk about how you incorporate secondary sources as evidence. This page may look a little bit different than what it does right now. In fact, I know it will. And then we're going to also talk about conclusion paragraphs. If you can't wait, there's a teaching on it right there, and you can get started working with the paragraph structure even before our next lecture next week on Wednesday. Are there any questions for me as we close out our webinar for today?
No, ma'am.
For this one, is it okay if I use something that I couldn't, source that I couldn't find on the database, but it's by NASA?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
everything has to be from the database, and that's to keep the integrity with our syllabus. So we want to make sure everybody gets the same advantages.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Oh, so how would you know for like plagiarizing like someone's work?
That's such a good question. So plagiarism is an important thing to think about as you're writing essays. Instead of me knowing if you're plagiarizing, you want to make sure that you just don't set yourself up for plagiarism. So to answer your question, Daniel, I've been teaching for 20 years. And so I know a student's voice pretty much early in the semester, and I'll watch your voice evolve and grow over the semester as you deal with more academic work. Therefore, I can pretty much pinpoint when you've written something and when you patch plagiarized because you pulled things from other places and blended it with your voice. I kind of have an ear for it, if you will. Also, there are things that we have built into our information which lets us know if things come from other sources. So you just want to avoid it by citing as much as possible and offering explanations for the evidence that you're citing, and that will keep you out of hot water. This is also the reason I suggest that you don't summarize your evidence, but instead you cite your evidence and you directly quote it. It just makes things so much cleaner for you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, you guys, thanks so much for giving me time today. I will see you guys again next week. We'll pick up again with body paragraphs and conclusions, and have a good afternoon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
Bye.